Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Terumos, Chapter 1, Halacha 1. In the Art Scroll, we're on page 482. This is part 4 of the Shir. Today we're getting into the halachot on a deranged person. This comes up a lot of times in the Shas, also in Gittin, also in Baba Kama, and the beginning of Baba Kama, where it's dealing with what happens if somebody has a deranged person that they give a coal to watch. What happens if it goes and burns somebody else's property, who's going to be liable? Well, over here we're getting into the deranged person, a little bit about the minor. Again, these people that have lost their sense or don't have the understanding. And the Gemara is going to have a dissenting view from where we left off, where Rabbi Yochanan is going to be saying one is deemed to be deranged even though he's exhibiting one of these behaviors. What is this in regard to? Rav Huna, in the end of part 3 of the Shir, was saying that these are the signs where he's going to be considered to be deranged, and one of these is going to be that they go out alone at night, they lodge overnight in a graveyard, and they tear their garments, or they also destroy what is given to them. And the commentary on the details of that is in the end of part 3 of the Shir. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, just one of these is going to be enough. Now, they're going to elaborate on this view to explain Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bun says, it is reasonable that, which Rabbi Yochanan said, even one of these behaviors is going to apply regarding deeming somebody to be deranged. This is going to apply specifically to a case where he destroys what is given to him. Basically, the idea, says Marafulda, is that a person who exhibits this behavior alone is automatically going to be considered deranged. Why? Gemara says, even someone whom people consider the greatest of fools does not destroy everything that is given to him. In other words, says the Pnei Moshe, only a truly deranged person does this. In other words, a deranged person is going to destroy what is given to him, and accordingly, somebody who behaves in this way is going to be considered legally insane. But again, that's only if he exhibits only one of the 3 behaviors, and Rabbi Yochanan agrees he is not considered legally insane, but this is going to be the one that triggers it. In other words, only if he exhibits all 3 of those behaviors together is he going to be considered legally insane. But Rabbi Yochanan is saying there's other criteria for deeming somebody to be insane, and the Bet Yosef is saying that Rabbi Yochanan says that he's destroying everything that is given to him. That's what we just covered. Or that he also goes out alone at night and lodges in a graveyard and rends his garments. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's basically created this into 2 categories. And the Bavli, by the way, in Chagiga disagrees with this interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan's view and is holding that according to Rabbi Yochanan, a person is considered legally insane if he exhibits any one of the 4 symptoms mentioned in the Brisa. Now, over here, it's a little bit different. It's basically saying that the Yerushalmi interpretation is that there's this set of 4 things, and that if he has just the destroying of what he owns, that's going to consider him to be legally insane. Or if he shows, 3 of these other symptoms and they're together, that's going to trigger it. And the Bavli doesn't agree with that. Bavli is going to hold that if they have any one of the 4 symptoms. Now, this here is agadic. There should be a red light going off. Again, why are they saying that if he destroys what is given to him, he's considered to be deranged, and the greatest fool does not destroy anything or everything that's given to him? Why is that saying that? Because it's got to show that Hashem gave you a soul and gave you instructions on how to behave, and you're destroying what's given to you. You're destroying your world to come. You're destroying things if you are not behaving in a certain way, and only a fool is going to behave this way. So this is really a thing of Musar that's blended into here. Fine-tune whose actions are going to be invalid because of an unsettled mind. What's going to count for that? And the Gemara says someone who is seized by Kurdiakos does not have any of these signs of insanity. even though his actions are going to be invalid. Now, this is going to be in Mishnah Gittin 7:1, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of overlap between Terumos and Gittin. It's teaching over there that in that Mishnah, a person who was seized by Kurdiakos is unfit to divorce his wife, says Gittin 7:1, and the reason is because his mind is unsettled. Now, our Gemara over here in Terumos is going to be saying that somebody with this condition is unstable, and he might not even exhibit any of these signs of insanity beforehand. In other words, they might seem clear in conversation, and then later on, they're going to be unsettled. And the question is, even if he's not exhibiting any of these insane behaviors, he is definitely going to be insane or unclear in a certain shorter period of time. So the Gemara is going to ask, what are Kurdiakos or Kurdiakos? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yossi says it's a condition commonly called hamim. And this is a term basically saying that he's confused. And the idea is that maybe it's a sort of dementia or a sort of Alzheimer's or something like that. And the Gemara now is going to give an example of this kind of behavior that is similar to Kurdiakos or hamim. And it said a case came before Rabbi Yossi regarding a certain weaver to whom they would give a red thread among black threads, and he would continue to work without noticing anything was wrong, and a black thread among red threads, and he would similarly continue to work. In other words, what this is meaning to say, says Rabbi Kanievsky, is that they would give the weaver anything red mixed with black or anything black mixed with red, and then what would happen is he would become weakened. In other words, he would come into this state. Rabbi Yossi said that this is a symptom of the condition of Kurdiakos that the sages mentioned. Now, we're going to be getting into something that is showing, well, maybe bouts of insanity, okay? So the Gemara returns now to dealing with a deranged person, gets to the next segment of it, and it says that if at times deranged and other times stable, the law is as follows. At the time when he is deranged, he is deemed a deranged person for all his affairs, and at the time he is stable, he is deemed a mentally competent individual for all his affairs. Now, this is going to also be somebody who has fits of insanity and fits of clarity and lucidity. So when somebody is stable, the question is he still going to be deemed to be legally deranged, even though he is showing a period of stability? And this comes to be a malokit, right? So Rish Lakish is saying, if he does not have signs of insanity anymore, and they're only periods of lucidity, he is going to not be a deranged person. And the other opinion, Shmuel, is basically going to be saying that only in the time that he's insane is he counted to be an insane person. But in the times that he's clear, he is a clear person, and he does not need to do what Rish Lakish is saying, which is that he has to wait for this condition where he is sometimes insane to pass. Only when he is clear is he deemed to be clear. Now, this also is going to be important for regarding Gittin. Now, this case comes before Shmuel, and you had a man who was suffering from Kurdiakos, and he desired a divorce to give to his wife. And Shmuel said when he is stable, he can give his wife a get. Now, this is having two parts in his argument. In other words, during his period of stability, he is considered to be mentally competent. He can divorce his wife, and he can't divorce his wife when he has this period of instability. Now, the Bavli is going to be saying that even if he originally gave instructions for the get to be written and given to his wife, the agents can't carry out the directive while he is unstable. And the opinions of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is going to get clarified in a second. And Shmuel's ruling is going to touch on this dispute regarded in Yerushalmi Gittin 7.1 in the Mishnah there, that if a healthy man instructs agents to write a get and give it to his wife, and then he becomes seized with Kurdiakos, Rabbi Yochanan says that he may carry out his instructions even while he is suffering from this bout of insanity. But Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says that you cannot carry out instructions only when he is settled. In other words, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is saying because he has this condition that he is sometimes deranged and sometimes clear, that in itself is going to be a problem, and that you have to wait until this back and forth condition of this fellow passes. You can't just wait for a clear time. Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan are basically going to be saying that as long as you're doing it within this clear time, that's going to be okay. Now, the halacha is going to generally follow Rabbi Yochanan, especially in his disputes with Rish Lakish. And so the Gemara is going to answer and explain about this and say that Shmuel's ruling is more novel than that of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish and actually consistent with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And Shmuel, says this Gemara, says that when the husband is stable, he can give the get, meaning that he can do so during a temporary period of stability between these bouts of insanity. And by the way, even though he has this condition of Kurdiakos, so in other words, Shmuel is saying that this stable period can show even a partial recovery, or it can be talking about a partially stable period of time. And where is he getting this? They're building an asmata from a verse that comes in Isaiah 38:16, says, "May you stabilize me and give me life." And Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, however, says that the get can be given only when the husband is settled, meaning that, so the case in Gittin 7.1 says that he has to be settled. So it means that the husband has to recover from this back and forth condition so he doesn't have bouts of insanity. And Shmuel, his ruling is obviously more lenient because he says only during the clear times can he do these other actions. So we're seeing a boxing in of, well, who is going to be considered a legal actor in Judaism for doing things that have a spiritual component, whether it's marrying a woman or divorcing or separating out Terumos. Now, the Mishnah is going to list the next part, talking about whose truma separation is not valid. That is going to be the underage person, the minor. So the Gemara looks at the authorship of this ruling in the Mishnah. It says, who is the Tana who taught that a minor is unfit to separate truma? And says, is it not in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda? Because the Baraisa teaches that Rabbi Yehuda said regarding a minor whose father left him in a gourd field, that the minor was separating truma from the gourds, and his father's consent to his actions, his truma is valid truma. Now, I want to point out that the gourd field comes up in Isaiah 1:8, and over there it says, like a shed in a field of gourds, and the Baraisa is specifying a gourd field here rather than a grain field. Why is that? Well, I looked it up in Isaiah, and they're basically saying over there that Israel is acting like a field that's not a good quality field where they're growing lower quality crops, and you don't even care about it so much that you don't even have like a proper work booth, and it's just like a lower degraded sort of field that kind of will grow anything, and they just put a lower quality crop there. Now, the higher quality crop that you certainly want to watch more intently and has a higher value, and it produces more, that's going to be where you have your grain field. So over here, we're talking about a minor whose father left him in the gourd field, and we're talking about somebody who they weren't even doing this with something that's regarded as a higher quality crop or in a higher quality field. And so is the minor now, who is now separating out Terumos from this lower quality crop, is that now going to count or not? And so the gourds belong to the father, and since even an adult can never separate truma from another person's produce without the owner's consent, says the Mara Fulda, the father must consent to his son's actions in order for the truma separation to be valid. Now, the owner's constant consent is going to serve to authorize that this is his agent to separate out truma from the produce, but the agent himself has to also be fit for the valid separation. Now, in this case, the agent now is the minor. So we see Rabbi Yudah is going to validate a minor's truma separation. Now, it's going to emerge from the Sefer Ner that to Rabbi Yudah, a minor is not only empowered to perform a truma separation, he's also fit to act as an agent to separate truma for another's behalf. So the idea here from the Yoredeya 331-33 is that a minor who has reached the age of vows and is fit to separate truma is also fit to act as an agent to separate out truma from another's produce. And this is going to be in accordance with Rabbi Yossi and other authorities who maintain that a minor of that age, which for a male is going to be about 12 before his bar mitzvah, and he's probably going to be in some sort of training to have his bar mitzvah, that they can act as an agent for truma separation. And this, by the way, is going to be contrasting to other kinds of minors who are unfit for agency. So like Aaron Udalab, who you hear in the background, he's not fit, but somebody who's like going, bar mitzvah training and maybe is only a few months away, or bat mitzvah training, that they are going to be suitable. Now, we're going to be getting into a roundabout way now in this argument of if somebody separated out truma and they were minor, and can we get into a case of brera? Brera is going to be retroactive validation or disqualification, and so that's where we're going to be going, and we're going to say, hey, wait a second, can we have retroactive validated separations of trumos or not? And that's going to be a question that is a big maloket tanayim, and we're not really sure. We have an idea. Rabbi says that there is no brera, and Rabbi Yochanan says there's no brera, but there are a lot of other people who say that there is, including Rabbi Shimon and also Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi's separation of brera, or concept of brera, is a little bit different than Rabbi Shimon's. Now, the Gemara is going to move on and say that the sages say to Rabbi Yudah that it is not a valid truma when the minor is the one who separates and designates truma, and his father merely consents to his designation. And rather, it is a valid truma when his father is the one who guides the minor's hand and participates in the truma separation himself. So basically, Mara Fulda is going to say like this. It's going to say that it doesn't mean literally that the father physically aids the son to perform the separation. Rather, he has to reinforce the son's action by improving upon it. And when the father improves upon the son's truma separation, it's now considered as if he performed it entirely himself, and that's why it's called valid. So the Mara Fulda says that the son's separation by itself is not valid. Now, the father can guide the son by taking some produce and adding it to the son's truma pile, and that would demonstrate that he now wished for the entire pile to become designated as truma. And in a similar way, the father is deemed to be mentally designating the entire pile as truma, and this now is basically going to be saying a thing of, well, what's going to now qualify? Is it enough where the father just says amen to the son's truma separation? Is that going to be enough where the father even just repeats the amen? And then, is that going to count as a designation? So the question is, how far does this go? And the Gemara is going to try to clarify the sage's view. It says that if the father came and guided the minor's hand, does the separated portion become truma retroactively to when the minor physically is set aside, the part for truma, or does it become truma from that very point forward? So when the father takes the additional action and adds to the truma that the minor separated, he's indicating that he wants the minor's portion to be considered truma. Now, is that going to now make the minor's portion, which is not valid, to be valid retroactively, or does it become sanctified retroactively from the time when the minor separates it? In other words, is it going to become sanctified when the father did it, and that's kind of really what's done, and now the father indicated that this other portion here is also going to be part of the truma, and so the son's portion wasn't really designated, it was just separated out. Now that the father, put some portion into this, now that's when this is truma. Or are we going to say that the son separated something out, it wasn't truma, but now when the father added something, now that truma pile started when the son separated it out, not when the father put it in. There's a little bit different here, a little bit difference. In other words, the son is separating out Terumos, and you would say, well, maybe this is the point where the action started. So the query gets resolved, and Rabbi Shimon says, let us learn the resolution from this Baraisa that says that it's going to be a Tosefta, that it's going to talk about a minor, and it's going to be talking about a case where there's an unauthorized person trying to separate out truma from somebody else's produce. Now, you're not allowed to separate for somebody else's produce, but how do we know whether the owner objects to truma separation on the grounds of robbery? So the Gemara, and it's going to be quoting this Baraisa, saying like this, that if the owner came and found somebody standing in his field collecting produce and separating truma, and he said to him, you should really collect from these better grade fruits over here to give it to the Kohen as truma, then if there really are better fruits there, the owner does not object to the unauthorized separation on the grounds of robbery, and the produce is now going to be considered to be truma. Now, Rabbi Kanievsky says about this is showing the owner's willingness to be even more generous than the unauthorized person did in the choice of produce for truma, and that generous act of saying, you really shouldn't be taking from these fruits, you should be taking from these better quality fruits over here, that's going to indicate, says Rabbi Kanievsky, that he's approving of this unsolicited act of truma separation. Now, they came along and they did this. When was truma taken out, right? So the Gemara says that the owner does not object to the unauthorized separation on the grounds of robbery, and the produce is considered truma, but the Gemara says if there were not any better fruits there, the owner is clearly objecting to the unauthorized separation on the grounds of robbery, and the produce is not going to be considered to be truma. So the Mara Fulda says about this that if there was no better produce there, the owner's response is interpreted as a sarcastic expression of displeasure toward the person who is separating produce that he doesn't own, as if to say, if I possess better produce, you should have stolen that as well. And that's kind of like what it's saying. So the Gemara is going to be basically trying to draw a line. Where did the truma separation take place if it did? The Gemara says, now if the owner collected more produce for truma and gave it to him, then in either case where there actually was better produce or not, it is clear that the owner does not object to the unauthorized separation on the grounds of robbery, and the separated produce is therefore considered truma. Mara Fulda explains that this is because the owner is helping the intruder, and because he's helping him, he must be satisfied with his actions. Now, Rabbi Shimi concludes with this proof about somebody sneaking onto somebody else's property and separating out truma or produce that he doesn't own, and the owner coming along and commenting on it, maybe even guiding the robber's hands in a way, and saying, in this case, the Gemara says, can you say that the portion that the intruder separated became truma retroactively? No. Why? Because the owner was unaware of the intruder's action until he discovered him. And now that he discovered him, it's going to be truma only from that point on. And in the case here with the minor, the portion that the minor separates becomes truma only from that point forward. In other words, they're saying that there's no brera here. They're saying here that it's only when the owner indicated that he wished it to be truma, and maybe because he either consented or he added to the pile or he guided him to better quality produce, and that's when it's going to be. At that point, it turns on as truma, but not retroactively, And how do we know that the minor or even a deranged person, right? We're talking about a deranged person who has fits of clarity and fits of insanity. And you say, well, if an insane person who was insane separated out truma, but in a period of insanity, and then he had a period of lucidity and clarity, and he added to that, well, you would say, when did that truma pile start? Why do we care? Because of tamei and tahor issues, right? Or when does it actually transfer over to possession of a kohen? When can a kohen take it? And so, you would say that no, it's only when the lucid part of the guy added to this grain pile, then that's when the whole thing became truma, but not when he was insane. And similarly, that if we had the robber who came on and the guy didn't know about it and then discovered him, whatever he separated out before was not truma, but once he assented to it and he agreed to it and even added to it or helped him in some way, that's when it became truma. So this is showing a case for no brera. Have a great day. We're going to get into part 5 tomorrow.